The Legions of Athena. Chapter 29. Clouds had begun to move into the sky, slowly blocking out the sun. Just as well, for Charon disliked the sunlight. He disliked a lot of things truthfully, and if it was up to him, he would never leave Pluto. But the matter with Athena required a more diplomatic approach, which was ill-suited for the Capos. He stood on top of an 8-story building in the industrial area of Athens. He had just finished watching Athena slay the Drakon along with the brothers, Sleep and Death. "That Athena's quite the gal," Hypnos commented. "Do you think you can take her on, brother?" Thanatos did not reply. But Charon had to agree. Athena's strength was quite remarkable. The Olympian gods were in a league of their own. He wondered if the death god would be match for one of them. "In any case, this makes our task more troublesome. I was hoping the war would last longer," Charon observed. "You were hoping for hundreds more people to die." "How kind of you," Hypnos said sarcastically. Charon was not pleased with the condescension in his tone. Hypnos was like that. Unlike his brother, he was always more kind-hearted, but this often made him miss the big picture. "Yes, because the longer the war lasted, the more beneficial it would have been to us," Charon explained. "If the war had been extended, it would have greatly strained Athena's strength and resources. Then maybe she would have been more open to a helping hand from us." The plan finally dawned on Hypnos. "But now that she handled it herself, our dreams of an alliance are dead in the water," Charon completed. The plan was to return to her and offer her assistance once the tide of the war had shifted against her. But as you said, she turned out to be an incredibly capable woman. "So then what now?" Hypnos asked. "Now I head back to make my reports to the Don," replied the ferryman. "Great. I could use some rest back home," Hypnos said excitedly. "I'm afraid that will have to wait. Only I am returning to Pluto," Charon said, straightening his anchor-printed tie. "And what are we to do?" asked Hypnos. "Just stay here and observe. Ares might be stubborn enough to keep the war going for a couple more days. The two of you explore the city and try to find any useful information we can use as leverage for our next meeting with Athena," Charon instructed. "Also, someone needs to bring back my yacht. That's why you're leaving us here, so we can drive back your stupid boat," grumbled Hypnos. "First of all, Hypnos, it's a yacht, not a boat," Charon said. "And no, I'm leaving you here because we are no closer to an alliance with this nation than when we came. Now, I have to report back as quickly as I can, so I will be using my portals, but the two of you can still continue the mission here." Hypnos sulked, but Thanatos spoke. "Understood." Charon nodded, and a large purple circle appeared behind him. Despite Charon's lack of battle prowess, he did possess an extremely useful technique: portals. Charon could use his portals to transport himself between any place he had left his mark. Sadly, the Aegis prevented him from directly returning to Pluto, but it would get him close enough to the city entrance from where he could sneak out, and once outside return to the Dawn immediately. As he stepped through the purple portal, he addressed the two capos. "I wish you smooth sailing ahead." Then the portal closed behind him, and the ferryman had disappeared. Smooth sailing ahead. Where does he get all these ferryman lines from? Do you think he has a book where he writes them all down? Hypnos gestured to his brother, but Thanatos did not answer. "You're going to be silent and brood the entire time, aren't you?" Hypnos continued. The death god did not reply to that either. "Great, and here I thought Charon was a dull travel buddy," Hypnos commented. Ares stood in the Aethon, in the balcony of its throne room, his eyes scanning the battlefield. It was only 3 past noon, but thick clouds had darkened the skies above him, which reflected his mood perfectly. His dragon lay dead across the lands, with his men cowering behind its enormous corpse. They would have fled back to camp, but they knew better. They knew cowardice was seen as treason in Mars, and returning before signaling retreat was a crime punishable by execution. But none of them were pressing the attack either. They believed that the war was over and that they had lost. But Ares was too stubborn to signal retreat. Deimos had come to ask him permission to return the men, and had left the room swiftly on seeing the boiling rage he was in. It was inevitable, though. Standing there on the balcony, he could see no other way. He had considered entering the battlefield himself, but he knew that he could not get past the Aegis. His techniques were those that focused on self-armament and endurance, not strength. Though as a god, he did possess enough strength to hurl a cyclops across a field, it was not enough to break the Aegis. The same held true for his large collection of weapons. They were built for combat, best against flesh and bones, not mystical barriers. The Drakon had been resurrected from extinction just for that, but now it lay impaled by towers before his eyes. "Why so glum, piggy? Perhaps a song to cheer you up?" jeered a familiar, unwelcome voice. Apollo slowly descended from the sky and landed beside the war god, his skin glowing lightly even in this clouded sky. He leaned against the railing and said with a smirk, "You have failed spectacularly, it seems." Ares tightened his grip on the railing, crushing it like paper. Through gritted teeth, he spat out, "This is not the time to mock me, Apollo. My tolerance has met its limits, and you are the last person I wish to see right now." "Wrong again, war god," Apollo retorted, but he longer focused on Ares. He was gazing beyond Ares, inside the throne room. Then he said, "He is." The moment the sun god uttered those words, Ares felt the presence. It was so sudden and unexpected, but now it was impossible to ignore. He could feel eyes digging into the back of his neck, and a primal fear washed over him. Ares slowly turned to face his own throne room, but he had no doubt who was waiting for him inside. There he sat on the war god's throne, with nothing but a white toga covering the lower half of his body, held in place by a thick belt made of solid gold. His torso was bare, with only a long white shawl wrapped around his right arm, snaking its way over his shoulder to his back and its other end hanging freely from the left arm, next to a thick golden bangle made from 3 fused rings. His clothes almost seemed to float into place according to his movements. That was all. He wore no gloves or armor or even shoes. This did reveal his godly physique, which was the picture of perfection with wide shoulders and arms that would shame even Ares. His skin glowed as well, but unlike Apollo's, which was a faint shimmer, this appeared as celestial radiance, as though heaven itself resided within him. His hair was white, not the gray or silver that came with age, but a white as pure as fresh snow, thick and swept back and running across his face in the form of a prestigious beard. He sat there waiting with his legs crossed and his eyes closed. Apollo and Ares entered the room and stood before the man on the throne. Then Apollo kneeled to the floor respectfully, and Ares, who was still shaken by the sight of the man, decided that it would be wise for him to do the same and knelt beside the sun god. Up close the man looked heavenly. His face was not one would forget or want to see disappointed. He slowly opened his eyes, his pure white eyes with no pupils. But the same divine radiance shone from these white eyes as well. The man slowly placed both his bare feet on the floor and rose from the throne and moved towards the 2 kneeling gods. "Rise, my sons," commanded Zeus. Their benefactor had finally come in person, and this was not a good sign. The 2 gods got back to their feet while Zeus passed between them to see the war zone himself. Ares waited nervously. He had failed his master in the capture of Daedalus. He had even been permitted to launch a full-scale attack on Athens, but that had not gone well either. "Tell me, Ares, do I not treat all the Olympians as my own children?" Zeus asked, still looking down at the battlegrounds. "Yes, my king, and we are unworthy of such love," Ares said. "Then why do you insult me?" came the next question. "My king, I would never," Ares began. "And yet you Dido," Zeus said, turning to face the war god. "You insult me by being so weak, by your constant failure, and Athena as well by not handing over the inventor when asked. Now even my previous champion has insulted me by killing the inventor and hiding behind my brother's tail." Ares did not answer. The god king spoke in a calm voice like a concerned father, but Ares had been alive too long to be fooled by this. The Sky Father was not happy. "Athena, my poor misguided daughter," Zeus said. "Things have been strained between us since her mentor's death, but she was always a clever girl. I should have known that she would figure out that I was involved in the death of Themis." Ares would have laughed if he wasn't frozen with fear. "Was involved," Zeus said, like he merely looked the other way, while in truth Zeus had killed the Titan Themis with his own hands. But Ares wasn't stupid enough to point this out now. "But her mistake I can understand," Zeus said, moving closer to Ares. "But what about you, my son? I gave you the title of Olympian god, and you repay me with such weakness." "Master, I promise you, I will never fail you again," pleaded the ruler of Mars. Zeus placed a hand on Ares' shoulder. 2 of his fingers lightly stroked the war god's trembling face. Then with an understanding smile, Zeus said, "I know, my son." Thunder boomed outside in the sky, and it was the only thing that masked the war god's scream. Ares was back on his knees, quivering in pain. His hands clutched the side of his face. His left ear lay on the floor beside him. Ares bit down hard to stop himself from screaming. "Why, Ares, I already told you to stand," Zeus said. Ares stood again. His whole body was shaking. Blood leaked profusely from where his ear used to be. "Apollo, help the poor boy. You know how I dislike the sight of blood," Zeus said as he turned and stepped out into the balcony. Apollo, along with being a remarkable marksman, was also the god of healing. He was one of the few people who could heal a wound inflicted by Zeus. He put his healing hands up against Ares' wound, and the bleeding stopped instantly, but the mark and pain still remained. Out on the balcony, Zeus asked, "Is that the Aegis wall that has been troubling you so?" Ares, still too shaken to speak, merely nodded. "I could bring it down with the snap of my fingers," Zeus said, "but I am afraid such a task is beneath me." "Worry not, my lord. I will find a way myself," Ares said, regaining his voice. "No, despite your shortcomings, I feel that Athena must be disciplined for her actions regarding the inventor," Zeus said. "Therefore, I shall lend you some assistance." The god king then turned to the large teak double doors leading into the throne room and shouted, "Come forth, my champion!" At his command, the doors swung open, and there stood a man. The man walked in, towering over 7 feet with his bright golden eyes fixed on his master for his orders. "Champion, it seems that Ares has a predicament. I wish for you to help him with it," said Zeus, and his champion nodded. The god king then turned to Ares and said, "One last thing before I depart. Athena, I want her brought to me alive. Do not fail me again, my son, or you will misplace more than an ear." Then with blinding flash of lightning, Zeus had disappeared. Ares and Apollo now stood staring at the silent champion. Their instructions were clear, and failure was not an option. The champion stepped forward wearing boots made from the hide of the barbarian king's flesh-eating horses, which he killed. He also wore a thick, jewel-encrusted belt that once belonged to the undefeatable queen of the Amazons who he defeated. And on his back he wore a cape weaved from the feathers of the Stymphalian birds Ares was so proud of, feathers he collected as he personally clipped their wings. His hands were covered in gloves made from the black leather of the untamable Cretan bull, which he tamed. On his shoulder was a horned shoulder guard made from the skull of the unbeatable Erymanthian boar, which he slaughtered. And his armor, with the lion-faced chestplate, was forged from the impenetrable golden fur of the Nemean lion which he slay. And on his head, covering his silky brown hair, and hiding half of his long stubble and square jaws, was a helmet forged from the scales of the monstrous Lernaean Hydra, another fearsome beast to which he was executioner. This was a man whom men called God, and gods called monster. This was the champion of the world's mightiest kingdom, Jupiter, the champion of the city of the gods, Olympus, the champion of the god king Zeus. The Aegis wall, are you certain you can handle it? Ares asked the champion. You forget who you speak to. Even the gods know to respect his strength, Apollo said. The champion did not seem the least concerned by these words. Instead, he looked out into a balcony to get a good view of Athens. The Aegis wall is not our only concern, Ares said. Once inside, Athena remains, not to mention Odysseus, Theseus, and... It does not matter, the champion said in a deep grunted voice, cutting off the war god. Excuse me? Apollo said. The champion spoke again. The names of the ones I hunt do not matter. In the end, they are all the same. Born to be crushed by my hands. Born to be crushed by Hercules. This has been a chapter from Book 2 of the new World Odyssey Series, The Legions of Athena. Links to the books in the bio. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next chapter.